Hello Eternal Life fans, it's Rowan from the Eternal Life Fan Club, and today's video is going to be about agnosticism, and I'm very excited. I'm excited because life is beautiful, and I'm excited because there's so many unknown future possibilities, and that's kind of the point of agnosticism. Agnostics are really good at admitting what we don't know. Okay, so we're just, that's our specialty, is our lack of knowledge, and we'll just admit that. We'll throw it right in your face and say, hey, we don't know. And South Park, the makers of South Park, they understand all of this, and I highly recommend. They made a very funny episode about agnosticism that you should watch.
And if this food comes as a gift from some divine intelligence, we understand that an intelligent being cannot blame us for questioning its existence. Nobody knows, nobody can know if any deity is watching over us. Amen.
Yeah, so basically agnosticism is a beautiful thing. It's awesome. It's awesome to admit what you don't know. Agnostics are very good at admitting what they don't know. It's being honest, okay? All right, now before I go on, I want to describe the 4 different categories that describe everyone on Earth. So everyone can fit into one of these 4 categories. Let's start with Gnostic theism. Okay, so a Gnostic is someone who claims to know that their belief is true. Okay, so a Gnostic theist, for example, is someone who believes in God and they claim to know that their belief is true. A Gnostic atheist would be someone who doesn't believe in God and also claims to know that there is no God. So they claim to know that their belief that there is no God is true, or that their lack of belief that there is no God. They're basically claiming to know that there is no God. That makes you a Gnostic. Or the theist claims to know that there is a God, okay? It's about what makes someone a Gnostic versus agnostic is about what someone claims to know. So a agnostic theist would be me, okay? I'm an agnostic theist. That means I believe in God and I don't know that there's a God. So I don't claim to know that my belief is true. My level of certainty is 0, okay? And then there's a agnostic atheist. That's what I used to be. So I basically jumped from here to here. But the whole time, I was an agnostic. Alright, so I also have to explain this. Most atheists fall into this category right here. So this is most atheists in the world are agnostic. So they don't believe in a God, but they also wouldn't claim to know for sure that there is no God. And then most theists fall into this category. Most theists actually claim also to know that there's a God. So they don't only just believe in God, they also claim to know that their belief is true. So those are the most popular categories. Alright, so the categories that the least amount of people fall into are this one right here and this one right here. These are the most rarest forms of theism and atheism. So we have the Gnostics. Those are the people who say they know. The agnostics are the people who say they don't know. The red depicts the least popular categories. The green is depicting the most popular categories of these 4. So think about it to yourself. Which are you? Alright, let's talk a little bit about these categories. I've never been a Gnostic in my life. I don't think I've ever claimed to know if there is or isn't a God. I've always fallen on the agnostic side, okay? And I just, this side has always confused me. People who have fallen onto this side have always confused me. Because, like, how do you know? How do you know if there is or isn't a God? It just doesn't make sense to me. It seems that if you're claiming to know that there's a God, you're claiming to know something that you don't really know. You're like pretending to know or something. I don't get it. So if you're a Gnostic, please tell me in the comments how you know if there is or isn't a God. So agnosticism really seems to make sense to me personally, and it definitely makes sense to most atheists. It makes sense to, that's definitely true. Like, if you look at atheism, like when I was an atheist, most of the atheists, the popular atheists, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, they always said they're an agnostic atheist. So they said they don't know for sure, right? So they're leaving some room for the possibility that they're wrong.
I suppose the one that is most often asked is, how can I say I know there's no God? And these are from people who don't understand the ABC of the atheist argument, which is that we don't say and can't prove that there's no God, but we will say there's no good evidence and there's never yet been evolved a good argument for saying that there is. That's why we're more modest than we perhaps look sometimes.
Which is that I can't know that there's no God, but I think it's the same as fairies. That's a sort of cautious thing to say. I'm not saying there's definitely no God, but the arrogance of a religious person who just knows, not only knows that there's a God, but knows it's this God, it's the Christian God, it's the Trinity, and the Virgin Mary was born of a virgin. I mean, they've got it all written down pat, and they've got absolutely not a shred of evidence for any of it. That's arrogance. No, I mean, I'm an agnostic too in that sense.
Now, some people say, well, everyone's technically agnostic, like everyone. And that's not really how people use the word. So we have the word agnostic to denote if someone is claiming to know or not if there's a God. So the word's not really about if you technically can or cannot know. The word really is, we have the word to kind of differentiate the people who claim to know that there's a God and the people who don't claim to know. So it's about, the word is really about whether or not you claim to know. It's not about whether or not you can technically know, in which case some would argue, yeah, everyone's an agnostic, but look, that's not really, you're kind of destroying the meaning of the word, because that's not how most people use the word. It's not about, you see what I'm saying?
That ultimately we are all agnostic. We are all agnostic.
So if you're one of these people who says, okay, agnostic, well, everyone's agnostic. Yes, I get the point, okay? People, to a logical mind, no one should say they know, right? But since there are people out there who are claiming to know if there is a God or not, such as the Gnostic theists and the Gnostic atheists, since there are these people that are claiming to know, I don't think it's very useful to just say, well, everyone's agnostic, because then where's the word to describe these people, right? We have to have this way to differentiate the people who claim to know versus the people who claim not to know. So I think, we should kind of not let this idea of agnosticism get destroyed, right? Because then we're just destroying words, and I don't know, I don't think that's very useful. So let's kind of leave it like this. I think this four category explanation thing is pretty useful to me. Rather than just saying, well, everyone's agnostic, because you might think this is obviously the most logical category, agnosticism, right? And you might think, well, everyone who's that's crazy to think you know. I agree, but we have to have a way to differentiate here. So it's not good for anybody. It's not useful to just say, well, everyone's agnostic, because that just confuses things. You see what I'm saying? To make it less confusing, there's really two questions going on. This is an important point everyone needs to understand. So there's two questions that need to be answered. The first question is what you believe. So that is, so if you believe in God, that makes you a theist, right? If you don't believe in God, that makes you an atheist. That's the first question. The second question is whether or not you claim to know. Okay? Whether or not you claim to know if there's a God or not. That's the second question. If you claim to know, that makes you a Gnostic, right? That's question number 2, Gnostic. If you don't claim to know, that makes you a agnostic, right? These are the people who don't know. That's another way of saying it. So you see we have these 2 questions, and this is where it can get confusing for people, because people try to merge this stuff into one, but there's really 2 questions that need to be answered. Now, I think that as far as whether or not someone believes, this question number 1, what they believe about God, like whether they're a theist or atheist, to me, I don't think people have a choice in this. It's like they're forced to be a theist or they're forced to be an atheist, because people don't choose what they believe. Okay? In fact, to be real about this, people also might not even have free will over whether or not they're Gnostic or agnostic. Okay? That might not even be someone's choice. If someone thinks they know there's a God, or thinks they know there isn't a God for some reason, I know it's crazy, absurd to think people know these sort of things, but if that's what they think they know, they might not even be able to control that. It's like their mind might be literally forcing them into this position of Gnosticism. And this could be the same way with agnosticism. It's like, are these things a choice? Or are people just forced to believe and think whatever they happen to think or believe? It's like, it's not really a choice. So it's really just it's really just an interesting question. These aren't really things like I tend to like judge people on. I don't like judge people like, oh, if you're in one of these categories, you're really dumb. I tend not to do that because I tend to judge people on their actions, because that's what really matters at the end of the day, is their actions, not what someone believes about this sort of thing. So it's just really more of an interesting question to explore. But yeah. Another question we can ask is, why is it that agnostic theism is so rare? Okay, the category I'm in as a agnostic theist, why is that rare, and why are so many more theists Gnostic? Okay, why are the people who believe in God so sure that there's a God? Interesting question, right? And you could also say the same with this. Why is it that it's reversed? With atheists, it's like most atheists are of the agnostic category, and very few atheists are in the Gnostic category. So that's another question we could ask. Okay, one way I could attempt to explain this is that I think there's an association between increased religiosity of a group of population and lower IQ. So as a population has increased belief in God, there's a general tendency for there to be lower IQ. Okay? So, and then as people tend to not believe in God and be atheists, there's a tendency towards higher IQ. Alright, so the way I would attempt to explain this is, I bet you there is, if we were to look at the data and to conduct polls and everything, we would find that there is a association between agnosticism and increased IQ, and Gnosticism and lower IQ. So the more Gnostic someone is, the more they think they know, the lower IQ. The more agnostic someone is, the higher IQ. So that would mean that this category right here would probably be the highest IQ, okay? So this would be the highest IQ group in general, as a general tendency, the agnostic atheists. The lowest IQ of this group, as a general tendency, I'm sure there are exceptions, but this would be the lowest IQ group, okay? So agnosticism makes you smarter. Because having a high IQ, you would recognize, the mind would be able to recognize what you can know and what you can't know. What information is outside of the realm of knowledge that it can be known, okay? So agnostics are really good at admitting what they don't know, and it takes a higher IQ to admit what you don't know. All right, so another thing I think is going on that we need to clarify here is that I think atheists in general, the people in this group of the high IQ agnostic atheists, a lot of them, when asked, what percent chance do you think there's a God, okay? They're not comfortable with calling themselves agnostic atheists. They don't like that term because the percent chance they ascribe to there being a God is so low, okay? They put such a low percent chance on it that they're like, well, it's verging on knowing. It's verging. I mean, they might put such a low percent chance on it, like 99.99999% chance that there's not a God, that it's verging on Gnosticism. It's verging on knowing, but they're like, oh, well, technically there's a 0.000 whatever percent chance that there's a God. So technically they would fall into the agnostic category, but they don't really think agnosticism defines them really well, because the percent chance that they put there to being a God is just so low, and that's another area of confusion. But they also wouldn't fall in the Gnostic category because technically, there's a certain percent chance that they're saying there is a God. Okay, a very low percent chance that most of these agnostic atheists would say that there's a low percent chance of there being a God. So they don't like any of these categories, really. But I would just say, for these agnostic atheists, I would just say, how do you even know that the percent chance you ascribe there to being a God is true? It's like, it's kind of arbitrary. Like, you throw out a percent chance. Okay, somebody says, I think there's a 99.9% chance that there's not a God. And I would just be like, well, how do you even know that percent chance is true? And if you claim to know that the percent chance that you put forward as being the percent chance that there's not a God, if you claim to know that that's true, pretty much makes you a Gnostic. Okay? And we know that Gnosticism, I think Gnosticism, as you tend towards Gnosticism, it actually shows you have a lower IQ, because it's smart to just not know these things. It's smart to not claim to know or not be so certain of these things. So there's that, just to think about. Like, how the heck, what percent chance? That's why I just love agnosticism. It's such a freeing idea to just not know. Just to be like, leave it a question mark. You don't need to act so sure of yourself. Either way, right? Whether there's a God, whether you think there's a God or not, it makes most sense to just be like, I don't really know. And that's the humble position, which is why I love agnosticism. And here's another question to consider, okay? In the comments, I want your answer on this. What defines you more? Are you more defined by the answer to question number 1 or the answer to question number 2? So, are you more defined by whether or not you happen to believe in God, whether you're a theist or an atheist, or are you more defined by whether or not you're agnostic or Gnostic? So, what's more important to you? Personally, I feel more of a sense of a shared commonality among anyone in the agnostic category. Okay, even though I'm a theist, there's a lot of, atheists. I actually feel more in common with these people, even agnostic atheists, because to me it's like that shared commonality of just that sense of not knowing. That to me, that's how I like to define myself more. I'm more defined by the agnosticism than by the theism. Because the theist versus atheism, it's like, who the heck knows? But it's like, at least I like the idea of an intelligence, a logical mind can at least recognize the agnosticism, right? That we don't know. That's what's more important to me than the whole question of belief, whether you happen to believe in God or not. But what's more important to you? Maybe for some people, they really, what's more important to them is whether they believe in God or not. But to me, that's really not a big issue. Because to me, the idea that someone would claim to know that there's a God or not, that idea of Gnosticism, the idea of knowing, is such a foreign concept to me. I can't wrap my head around that. And so, yeah, it's like this category, I don't feel like I have much in common with this camp of thought, okay? The Gnostics, the people who know. It's like, no, I actually feel more in common with anyone on the agnostic side, whether you believe in God or not. That's, to me, the real defining feature of the logical mind, is the not knowing. That's the defining feature of the pure imagination. Okay, to have a pure imagination, you have to admit what you don't know, because that leaves room for the possibilities. If you're claiming to know stuff, in my mind, if you're really pretending to know stuff, because the Gnostics, they don't know, they're just pretending to know, that just leaves you in this closed-minded delusion, right? Where you're not being open to all the possibilities. Because it's the agnostics who are open. We're admitting what we don't know. And that leaves room for what's possible. It's possible that there's a God. It's possible there's not a God. I don't know, but I'll be prepared for the worst. I'm going to prepare for all the possibilities. I'm going to prepare for the possibility that there's a God, and I'm going to prepare for the possibility that there's not a God. That means I'm going to try to live forever physically on this earth. I'm afraid of death because I don't know that there's a God. I'm afraid of God because I don't know that there isn't a God, right? So agnosticism really solves a lot of problems. If you could just admit what you don't know and then start preparing for the possibility of a God, and at the same time preparing for the possibility that there's not a God. That to me is awesome. I love agnosticism. That's why I had to make this video, because I love agnosticism so much. So if I can convince you to be an agnostic, if you're tending towards the Gnostic side, if I can just push you over to the agnostic side, I'd feel more in common with you. And I would hope I can impart agnosticism onto you.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
To wrap this whole thing up, agnosticism, okay? It's like Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka. All right, he said in the tunnel, he said, there's no earthly way of knowing which direction we are going. That's like agnosticism. There's no earthly way of knowing if there's a God or not. There's not even an earthly way of knowing what percent chance of there being a God. How do you know the percent chance? How do you know? It's like nobody knows. But anyways, this video's gone long enough. If you're agnostic, how about you watch that South Park episode and tell me what you think? Thank you. May you live forever.